Hi, Tsepka. Thank you all very much. My hereditary name is Wush'q. I've been here on and off actually for almost 35 years now at this point. One of the benefits going so late in the agenda is I can spend quite a bit of my time agreeing with so much of what has been said already. And to listen to Lorelei talk about not only the work that she does and what she does with the energy she has for this life in this world, but the deep respect that she has for her family and for those around her and for the other women and the other children. It's inspiring, it's encouraging, and to know that she takes time to care for her own spirit in all of it. It's a beautiful reminder. You know, since the discovery in Kamloops, I've spent a lot of time preparing my staff and sort of bracing ourselves for what the community was going to feel and what the community was going to experience. And through it all, you know, the thing that we saw most was our people were turning to culture, and our people were turning to ceremony, and our people were turning to each other. People were saying things out loud about how they felt. People were turning to their elders to ask them questions that they'd never asked them before. So everything we were preparing ourselves for was overshadowed by all of this beautiful resilience within our culture. I found myself consoling non-Indigenous people more because this is a new trauma for them. As Canadians, this is something that now we all collectively experience. And now that it is, the truth is revealed, I think a lot of our people are feeling vindicated. A lot of these stories were already told about these graveyards. I was speaking with Rai Moran, who's now at the University of Victoria. He was with the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, and he said there are story after story about men who say as boys they were woken up in the middle of the night to dig holes, and that's it. And nobody said what were the holes for, or how big were the holes, or where were the holes. Just left it, set it there. You've said your truth. Next. So it is challenging when you think about imagining them taking your child. My granddaughter, my sister's granddaughter, is just turned 5 years old, and you know there are all of these things where people say I can't imagine, but imagine being a residential school survivor and them coming to take your 5-year-old, and you know what's going to happen to that 5-year-old for the next 10 years of her life. Imagine then consoling your adult daughter as they come to take your grandchild, and the two of you know what's going to happen to that child for the next 10 or 15 years of her life. It is devastating to think about the system of work camps or slave camps. I think we have to get away from referring to them as schools. There was nothing educational about them. It is very difficult at this time to be going through this as a country, trying to sort of do our work and console the world. And it is something that we have sort of just assumed is sort of part of our role. We're in relationship. And so it is my responsibility to share the burden of some of your trauma. And now this is some of your trauma. So it is hard, but it's something that we're facing now together. You know, there's so many challenges with what's happening right now, and with the way that the country has unfolded, and with the truth as it's coming to light. Normally, I would spend today celebrating as a community. We would gather together, we would sing, we would eat, we would dance. And I've always been very deliberate not to bring politics into the celebration, to bring any pain or suffering, but you know, this year it felt like it was necessary to address things very squarely, very frankly, and very head on. So when Islam Unravelled reached out, I paused for a brief moment and decided that yes, I would speak on these matters in this context on this day that we normally celebrate ourselves and our culture and our resilience. And, you know, I think the other challenge that is coming is all of the cries to cancel Canada Day. And the challenges that brings is that creates a divide, a bigger divide between the people who don't understand or don't know or are not educated or informed about what's happened or why these calls are happening. So I've been very deliberate to stay out of the debate here in Victoria, at least, to say that's not my decision. That's your day of celebration. I just don't see how fireworks or a carefully curated list of bands is going to help us at this point. But don't say it's because of me and my pain that we're canceling it. This is about somebody else's guilt. This is about somebody else's trauma. This is about somebody else's truth. Don't put it on me. With regards to reconciliation, there has been a lot of work that has been done. And I feel like I've done my fair share. I feel like I have developed a lot of relationships where I can, you know, sort of lean over to somebody and say, well, that's your stuff, or you need to pick this up and take it from now, because this is where I'm done. I think, you know, one of the things that I always talk about is Alec Nelson. He said, if you're comfortable, then you're not doing it right. It is a very uncomfortable time for us as a community, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. And we're going to have some very uncomfortable conversations, but only for the next 2 or 3 generations, and then we'll be through it. You know, this idea that to have a year of reconciliation, it's unreasonable. You can't fix anything in 1 year. I won't accept just 1 year. I am committed to doing this for the rest of my days. And I've been talking to my nieces and nephews and now having little conversations with my grandnieces and nephew so that they understand that this is going to be hard work for 2 or 3 generations, and then we'll be through it. And then we can say we have reconciled. But it is something it is going to be challenging. You know, Lorelei talked about Chantal Moore and wellness checks. And, you know, the one thing that I've tried and sort of draw a straight line from that incident on June 4th to another incident on July 3rd. Chantal Moore was in her home, may or may not have had a knife. If she's Nuu-chah-nulth, I'm guessing she probably wasn't very tall. They're beautiful, powerful women, but you know, they're probably smaller than the average male police officer. And on July 3rd, a man who was, I'm not sure if he was former military or military of Caucasian ancestry, crashed his truck through the gates at the Prime Minister's residence with several illegal firearms, with rifles on his body and in his vehicle, and they spent 3 hours negotiating a peaceful settlement. He crashed his truck through the gates at our Prime Minister's residence, and they spent 3 hours negotiating a military man's de-escalation, and yet Chantal Moore was shot in an instant. So you can't talk about systemic racism without drawing straight lines from where the system is broken. In plain sight, and the investigation that happened here in British Columbia and the healthcare system, it is not enough to say we won't be racist anymore. We have to spend time to rebuild the trust and the relationship from the people who have lost faith in the healthcare system. I have been in too many situations. I was doing an event a few years ago. We do something called the back to school picnic, where we take school supplies to different communities around the island and around the province here in BC. And we were in Port Alberni, and a volunteer, a young woman who had come, and she had gotten school supplies from us for a couple of years, and now she was in college and she just wanted to come and volunteer, but she had a new baby. And she said, I'm just waiting. My neighbor's going to come and watch the baby. And she went to hand over the carrier, and the babysitter didn't realize that the bottom of the carrier, the cushion had slipped. So she only grabbed the top of the carrier, and the bottom of the carrier fell, and the baby fell out on the pavement of the parking lot. And everyone screamed and picked up the baby, who was silent, which is scary. And my late mother was there. She was a retired nurse, and she said, we've got to go to the hospital right away. And the young mother said, they won't do anything for her. They won't do it. They won't listen to me. We'll just sit there for hours and they'll tell us to go home. And my mom insisted, no, we have to go. And she said, if you're not going to take her, I'm going to take her, but I would like you to come with me. So off they rushed to the hospital. It was only a few blocks away. And sure enough, my mom, because she's a nurse, she speaks hospital room, emergency room, explained what happened, and they took her right in, and they saw her right away and took great care of her. And the woman said, I've never had that kind of treatment at the hospital before. If my mother wasn't there, if we weren't there, would she have had her baby treated? Probably not. And there are stories like that, where firsthand people have said, I don't trust the healthcare system. They're not going to do anything for me because I'm Indigenous. I was working with a friendship center, so I actually have a PowerPoint, which I'm probably not going to refer to now, but I worked with BC friendship centers around BC, and one of the challenges in the north is dentists won't see status Indians because they don't want to deal with the paperwork. So if you want to go see the dentist, it's 2 or 3 hours drive to see the one dentist who will see status Indians. And that's just the way it is. They have whole programs designed around it, that all of the dentists in that northern city don't see status Indians. That's racism. It's because they have extra paperwork. We talked a little bit about the education system and the curriculum, and to hear people talk about the necessity. We can't. And I've been talking about this a lot this year too. We can't blame people for their ignorance. They're part of this failed education system. I didn't know that. When they took down the Sir John A. Macdonald statue here in Victoria, I had to Google bad things Sir John A. Macdonald did. I wasn't taught in school. I didn't go to post-secondary, but to hold people accountable when they've never been taught. They've never been told the atrocities that we've suffered as a people. They've never been told the truth about the people they erect statues to. So although I was in great favor of the statue coming down here in Victoria, and never thought I would be on the side of let's find a place for it, I thought the perfect place, and I told Mayor and Council this, the perfect place for it is at the bottom of the harbor. And maybe his finger can be pointing out in the middle, just so we remember he's there. But now I think there is a place for him, as long as there is some truth in it, as long as there is some information that people can understand. This was once a very powerful man who did some very bad things and made some very bad decisions, and set up some policies that are still rippling through our community today. The looking at things like the correction system and policing and healthcare and MCFD, even place names, fighting over place names. We're having I feel like we're having some good responses to some of the names that are the places that are being reclaimed. It's not that we're changing the name, we're going to start calling it by its actual name. Different mountains in different areas in this region, and the municipalities in the province are now open to that idea. So we're lucky in that way. I think for me to think about reconciliation and what it means, and St. Mary's, I've been to this St. Mary's in Mission, the Aboriginal the back to school picnic that I was talking about. The elders chose the old school grounds for the picnic. And I took a deep breath, and my mom, she came on the tour with me, and I just said, "Are you going to be okay?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm going to be okay." And she said, "But maybe we should smudge, maybe we should do something, maybe we should do something." And so the elders said that they wanted to serve the food, because food was a big deal in residential schools. Starvation was sort of part of the experiment. And they wanted to be part of the abundance, and they wanted to be connecting to the children, and they wanted to put love into that food. And we did it for 3 or 4 years before Mission took it over for themselves. But those elders would come and they would ring the school bell and they would call their ancestors in to show them the survival of our people. And it was a beautiful thing. We had a similar experience here in Victoria. The second year I had been involved with the planning, there was probably 500 or 600 people, and there was just everywhere lineups going this way and that way, and kids, running around having fun and getting their faces painted and jumping on bouncy castles and eating lots of food and watermelon. And I was standing up on the hill outside the Friendship Center looking at the sea of people, trying to see if there was any problems, and I could see this elder who was starting to hunch more and more over her cane, and I thought she was in medical distress. So I called for first aid and went and grabbed a chair and grabbed a tent and grabbed some volunteers, and we put the tent over her. She got her seated down in the chair. First aid started taking her vitals, and I asked the woman, she was hunched right over her cane now at this point, should I call an ambulance? And she shook her head and she tipped her head back and she let out the most mournful cry I've ever heard a human make. And she said, "I never thought I'd see this day." She said, "They came and they took me away, and I never knew my parents. And they did things to me, and then they came and they took my daughters, and there was nothing I could do." And she says, "And now my granddaughters just went skipping down that path with their backpacks on their back, and they just want to get their faces painted and have lunch, and all they know is joy. All they feel in this moment as they get ready to go back to school is love." And she said, "I never thought I would see this day. I never thought I would have this feeling." And so in that moment, in this woman's epiphany, I realized my mother was a resistor. My grandfather went, and she was there for about a week, and he went and took my mother and her 2 younger siblings out, and he put them in a closet in the house and sat in the kitchen with a loaded rifle, waiting for the priest and the RCMP to show up, which they did. And he fought. He said, I will shoot whoever crosses my threshold. Who would like to be the example to the other?" And the priest screamed and stomped and threatened eternal damnation. And the RCMP officer, to his credit, said, "Let's go away. I'll come back and talk to this gentleman." And he said, "I'm going to come back." And so he came back the next day and said, "Your kids need to be registered for school. That's all." And my grandfather, he worked for Mac Below at the time. He was able to register his kids in a private school just down the street. They went to school every day and came home every day. And that RCMP officer was the one who de-escalated the situation and didn't make it so that my grandfather had to kill somebody to protect his children. But he did have to load his rifle, and he did have to sit there and and stake his claim. This is my house, these are my children, and I will decide how they're raised. And while this woman is having her epiphany in the parking lot at the Friendship Center, I realized that everything that I have achieved in my life was because of that moment of defiance. We are a resilient people, and we are working hard, and all we ask is for other people to take on their fair share of reconciliation. Help us find this balance that we are so desperate for. Realize it's not something, it's not a checkbox, it's not going to happen quickly. And there's lots of ways for us to get there. You know, whether it's Adam representing his people or his constituents, maybe they're your people too, at a provincial level, or other politicians at a national level, whether it's, you know, chief and council, whether it's counseling and therapy, whether it's culture, you know, this idea of people dancing and being referred to as butterflies. It just brings joy when you hear it and when you say it out loud. Culture is something that can not only help people feel something and help people understand something. Not only is it a demonstration of our resilience, but other people feel things too. And there is something about music, there is something about song, there's something about regalia, there's something about storytelling. All of the government reports and all of the journalistic reports, we can put them out there, splash headlines from coast to coast to coast, and tell people emotionally connect to these stories. They're not going to understand. They're not going to feel anything about it. You know, I think this idea of not being emotionally connected to these stories is wrong. I think there are people that are afraid to take that wall down. And I think if we can get more people to sort of feel those things, then I think it will be a great breakthrough for us as a country. There are lots of other challenges with policies and things like that. I mean, if you think about oral tradition and you think about Indigenous language, if this country had spent half as what it spent on French, on Indigenous language, I would speak my language today. I think there are about 35 people who speak my dialect now. Cowichan Tribes is the largest nation in British Columbia with 4,900 members, and I think there are 35 fluent speakers left. And the youngest is in her 60s. So what happens when those 35 people are gone? If this country spent half as much as they spent on French. So recently we received $50 million a year. That is a third of what they spend on French in the province of British Columbia. It's staggering to think about. I think for the Victoria Native Friendship Center, we've been doing this for 53 years in August. We have started out with one employee who helped people get apartments, find apartment buildings that would rent to Indians. That was a problem back in the day. And then that turned into finding people who would employ us. Finding jobs was like fish in a barrel back in the day. We just needed an introduction. Today we have 135 employees. We've got 54 contracts. You know, this idea that the government is giving us things. The proposal process to get those contracts is onerous. The contract negotiations to get those contracts is onerous. The reporting process to report out on the things that you said you were going to do and the things you negotiated is onerous. And then the audits that you have to go through afterwards to make sure that everybody did what they said they were going to do for the amount they said they were going to do it. And, you know, it is challenging as a nonprofit of this size to spend so much of my year getting money into the organization, accounting for it all, and then getting it out. I spend very little time with my staff and with my people. I spend most of my time working with governments, working with funders. It is a challenge, but a burden that I've accepted and work very hard at. I'll never forget the frustration of, so if anybody's ever been to the Victoria Native Friendship Center here, we have 3 totem poles representing each of the island nations here on Vancouver Island, and worked very hard to get those. They were tied to an employment program. And we were trying to come up with some sort of solution to get more people into the program. They were running half empty. The people who signed up, only half of them would finish. And so that would mean 2 or 3 people would have jobs at the end of it or be in post-secondary. And we decided to try something big. And so we said, if you come to training on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you can carve on the totem pole on Thursday and Friday. Suddenly the program was full. 95% of the people who started finished, and 100% of the people who finished had a full-time job or were registered into full-time post-secondary at the end. And the government was ecstatic. These were amazing statistics. So let's do it again. So we did it again. And we carved another totem pole, and 96 more people got, jobs, went through this program. And then when it came time to do it a third time, our contract manager changed. And they said, we've heard great things about this program, and we've heard you've had some amazing results. It's time to start it over again. So we submitted the proposal, and she said, this looks great. We'll do everything except the totem pole, because we don't do public art. So you either have to take out the totem pole or withdraw the proposal. And we said, well, the totem pole is the reason it's successful. And we explained the whole thing, and we showed lots of pictures, and no. So we should have asked them for a no. We should have said no, respond to the proposal, but no, we withdrew it, and we found some private money, and we were able to do it. But the challenge that we face as Indigenous nonprofits is that we are always fighting with the government, who wants us to be innovative, who wants us to be creative, but gets in the way when they start to say things like that. It is a big challenge. I spent most of the day being interviewed today by people excited about a gesture of reconciliation that's happened to us. There's a woman, her name is Marian Cumming, and she has donated 2 houses to the Victoria Native Friendship Center. One is in 1.4 acres up in Cowichan Station, about 30 minutes north of us. 1.4 acres, and the other one is in Oak Bay. And it's not even the first time she's done this. She did it 30 years ago on the East Coast. Her and her husband, Bruce, donated 288 acres and their families' homes to the local nation. Long before reconciliation was even a concept or an idea, her and her husband said, when we go, the land should be given back to Indigenous people. So I have hope. I have confidence. I'll do this for another 25 years and train a bunch more people to do it behind me. I believe there are open hearts out there, and there are open minds, and we just have to find them. We just have to connect with them that way. We have to share the load. We can't take it all ourselves. We have to find some peace for ourselves as well as for our people, so that we can run this marathon and finish it.